When it came to women, what was the most difficult thing to handle? Time? I thought for a second. The quantity. I had been lovingly embraced by the years. Lifestyle, not chronological age, was what mattered, as I had realized a long time ago. Personal ties? No, that's also not it. Ray and I were married for 10 years. Nothing went wrong, at least not major issues, because we were in sync. However, there were certain things that persisted, things that you were unable to precisely identify and things that you chose to ignore. Something unidentified has been brewing inside of me for some time. Tate, a poet. A child born to Ray and his first wife. It had always seemed like the word step was too cold and remote, even from the start. Although I did not bring him up, he had been a part of my life for quite a while. Even though he was now 23 years old, he was still shy, timid, and restrained, despite his success, charisma, and good looks. The thing that worried me the most was the space between us, the unseen barrier. He seemed to be waiting for something, but he never told us what it was. He stayed that one step apart from us the whole time. That was the riskiest part. That was why I had insisted on never letting us be alone for extended periods of time. Everything remained in check as long as Ray was around. There were no ambiguities. Rest assured, all was well. All was set for the business trip to Chicago. Ray was expected to show up as per usual. However, while we were having breakfast together this morning, he stopped talking about his project in the middle of his sentence. I am not going to be able to reach the occasion. Without me, you two can move forward. Pause for a moment. Excuse me? It was clear he was joking. But no. With his mind made up, he sipped his coffee. The lines on Tate's plate were followed by his gaze. Dad, I am also exempt from going. No way, Ray said, shaking his head. No. It is vital that you choose Callie. The experience is essential. You will learn a lot just by being in her presence. Quite the opposite was happening to me as I absorbed Ray's seemingly carefree speech. In my tummy a little knot formed. My gaze dipped to Tate for an instant. He had already fixed his gaze on me. When that happened, so expressive. The whole thing was brief. I had been attempting to escape that same sensation, yet in those brief moments it was there. There would be no one else around for us. Ray got to his feet, grinned, and put his hand on my shoulder. He playfully asked that you look after him. As if I were the only one who didn't require safeguarding. Still, Ray remained in the dark about something. Perhaps I was the one who required protection. On paper, some strategies appear flawless. One of them was this trip to Chicago. The thought of transforming a business conference into a mini vacation for my family seemed like a fantastic one. Tate would also benefit from this opportunity. Getting a closer look at the corporate world, building connections, maybe even opening doors for his future. However, the tide was turning. Because Ray changed his plans at the last minute, Tate and I would be by ourselves. I felt an uncontrollable surge of restlessness as a result of that idea. I was alone with Tate later that night. Preparations for the trip to Chicago were being reviewed. However, at some point the topic of discussion began to change. As we spoke, I filled him in on the types of individuals he could expect to meet and offered guidance on how to succeed in the corporate world. The longer we spoke, though, the stronger it became for me. A change had occurred. Plus, I had no idea if he was the only one, even if it were my turn. He was staring at me, though, going beyond passively receiving information, paying attention. And each time our eyes locked, I felt that old familiar knot in my gut. Was Ray the one tasked with drawing the boundaries? I was the one who had to take the initiative this time. I knew I couldn't, though, in my heart. What if Ray's absence caused things to spiral out of control? It was necessary for me to disregard the idea. You have never heard admissions like this before. If you want to help us out, you may subscribe, set on notifications, and join the channel. You will want this narrative to go on forever before we go on. Overcast skies greeted us on the morning of our journey. We had adjacent seats at the airport. With his hands rubbing together, Tate wriggled his knees. No sound. Taken back. However, the customary quietness wasn't there this time. Something between us had started to form even before we said a word. We found our seats on the plane and got comfortable. A window belonged to him. I stood beside him. First, there was a lot of small chat. Tasks, initiatives, and Chicago's climate. However, his voice subsequently became quieter. I guess it's for the best that my dad didn't show up. I looked over at him. For an instant our gazes locked. Why? I inquired. Everything came crashing down when my throat went parched. Tate shrugged, a subtle, self-assured grin tugging at his mouth. Why? Because being in his presence changes you. So it seems like you're trying to get away from something. My heart raced. Could you please clarify what he meant? Had I? The question wasn't the most terrifying aspect, though. What mattered most was that Tate had taken note. The sun had fallen by the time we reached Chicago. We double-checked the booking that my business had made in the hotel foyer. With a smile on her face, the receptionist passed over 2 key cards. Madam Callie, your family suite is prepared and ready for you. Under my breath I scowled. Are you looking for a family room? With a nod, the woman acknowledged. Indeed, a roomy suite featuring a double bed. From what I understand, no additional room was reserved. Pause for a moment. Excuse me? I thought the business had reserved 2 rooms for us. Unfortunately, we were now roommates. Tate moved closer to stand by my side. He assured me it was fine. His voice exuded an air of serene composure. However, it caused a knot to form in my gut. Is everything okay? Upon entering the suite, an overwhelming sense of opulence washed over us. The room was filled with a calm energy due to the floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the city lights of Chicago. The room had 2 beds. It was still as if something was wrong. Tate removed his outerwear and tossed it over a seat. Standing near the window, I gazed up at the cityscape below. Feeling exhausted? He came up behind me and asked. For a little moment I lowered my eyes. My heart raced for some reason in response to such a basic inquiry. I shifted my gaze to meet his. His gaze was gentle. Not shallow enough. Too risky. Just a tiny bit. Propping himself up on his bed, Tate extended his wrists. Even though this is a business vacation, I think we can still find time to relax and have fun. Smirking, he grinned. I knew at that very second. Prior to being here, all of my intuitions were correct. The absence of Ray caused certain things to lose their limits. And this time, nobody was around to enforce the limits. Swiftly regaining his composure, Tate leaned back with a mischievous smile. Not the hotel but the pub. Some downtime is in order for me. A sigh escaped my lips. There was no need for the stress I was feeling. An original work of mine. Perhaps he had a point. Unwinding for a while probably wouldn't hurt. Smiling, I looked about. Yeah, join me in enjoying myself. It was unexpectedly chic, the hotel bar. A sumptuous ambience that melted into the darkness of a Chicago night, complete with low-key jazz music in the background. After a couple of beers, I could feel a burden being lifted off my shoulders. We had a conversation. Laughter escaped both of us. And then it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that liberated. Tate gave off the same vibe. Calm down. Less heavy. As he drank, his timidity gradually faded. For some reason he kept staring at me. Something about our chats was more profound and powerful than words could describe. I remained careful, yet a part of me quivered. Had I never thought he was handsome before? Had it always been like way? And still would not acknowledge the truth? The time had slipped away. It was completely devoid of any taste in my drink. Tate reclined, staring directly at me. He chewed his lip as he studied me. Very little. It was at the worst possible time. I could not prolong my stay here. I carefully placed my drink on the bar and rose to my feet. I'm going to the upper floor. The morning is when I have a meeting. You also shouldn't stay up late. A subtle smile danced across Tate's lips as he gave a subtle nod. Very well, Callie. Have a wonderful evening. However, he looked directly into it. It appeared as though they were anticipating my next statement. Upon reaching the room, my unease persisted. The uneasiness, nevertheless, was not negative. A sense of impending helplessness best described it. In the corner, I tossed my stuff. I noticed it as I walked toward the restroom to change. The hot tub. My mind is a complete jumble with all these ideas. It could be helpful to add some hot water. I had some alone time as Tate hadn't come upstairs yet. I reflected on what had transpired as I dove headfirst into the soothing water. Everything about our interaction, the intimacy, the discourse, and my physical reaction to him. I drew a long breath. What the fuck? Was it the alcohol alone, though? However, I was unable to deceive myself. This emotion hadn't materialized without warning. This evening was the first time I had ever allowed myself to experience it. I got out of the jacuzzi, changed into a robe, and made my way to my bed. Still I was halted. Tate, a poet, drunk to a moderate degree and sound sleeping. He lay spread out on his bed. A button was missing from his shirt, and a button was loose on his pants. I felt a surge of comfort. He appeared really stunning. Observing him in this state, completely vulnerable and unprotected, it utterly devastated me. As I swiftly turned away to change, I held my breath. It was still not simple. His breaths echoed through the room. Continuous, profound, reassuring. I raised my head and looked back at him for a second. I couldn't help but notice his breathtaking good looks. For what amount of time could I continue to deny this? One thing, nevertheless, was certain to me. The line I was standing on was really precarious. Change is necessary, Tate. A little raspy came out of his mouth as he blinked himself awake. He looked directly at me. He then grinned. It was wrong of him. In any case, he succeeded. I realized I was staring too long when his ample toned chest was staring back at me. However, I couldn't tear my eyes away. Tate allowed his beaming eyes to meet mine. And I knew right then. This was only the first night. We got ourselves dolled up and refined, crisp attire the following morning. Feelings of unease from the previous night lingered in the room. However, we both pretended that the incident had not occurred. Observing Tate button up his shirt, I could feel the warm morning sun streaming in through the windows of Chicago. So level-headed. How self-assurance. So grown up. How dashing. Okay then. Potentially harmful. I clenched my jaw and reached for my purse. Hey, how about we get going? I inquired. Tate peered into my eyes as he slung his jacket over his shoulder. Get me ready. Oh, and I was also prepared. But at the moment I was unsure of my level of preparedness. I experienced an unusual feeling of relaxation by the time we departed from the meeting. My first intention was to watch Tate and note his adaptation to the new setting. However, he was unnecessary. He inspired confidence just by being himself. Tell me how it went, I inquired. In a subtle nod, Tate cocked his head. I mainly engaged in passive observation and listening. However, it was undeniably helpful. Smiling, I looked about. Today you remained silent. You only remained at my side, acting as my helper. Nothing will be too much for you to manage when you finally attend your own meetings and overcome your fear of public speaking. I pivoted to face him and chimed in. As a 48-year-old woman who has attended numerous sessions, I am telling you this. You have my word. After giving me a brief glance, Tate nodded. I have faith in you. I was speechless for a second because his voice was so real. I lightly tapped his shoulder to alleviate the stress. Here, let's go get some coffee. Near the hotel there was a little cafe where we sat. While staring intently into space, Tate stirred his coffee. And then there's your private life. Casually I inquired. His head cocked upwards. Can you explain? As a response I just shrugged. Is everything all right with women? He gave me a quick look before he smirked. Frankly, I'm not sure what to say. He had my doubts. Right now at the pub out on the street, eyes were fixed on him by the women. He seemed completely oblivious to it. However, Tate never escaped being the focus of attention. That realization disturbed me for some reason, which was absurd and incorrect. The sardonic manner in which I placed my coffee cup on the table, however, was impossible to conceal. We should return to the inn. Tate didn't challenge it, though he did appear rather taken aback. On our way back, we stood up and began to walk. As we made our way up the hotel steps, my annoyance remained unchanged. I was too afraid to ask myself why I felt this way. Possibly it is the reason I failed to pay attention to my footing. Exactly as I was about to enter the elevator, my heel gave way. I felt a searing agony radiate from my ankle. Oh my! In an instant I tripped. Tate grabbed hold of me just in time to prevent me from falling. To keep me from wobbling, he put his arm around my waist. My heart was racing. Very near indeed. Are you all right? An air of worry floated in his voice. I raised my eyes to meet his gaze. They stood there. I felt a spark ignite within me the moment he met my gaze. I choked. I may have twisted it a bit. It was critical that we reach the room. Immediately, Tate acted. To provide me some support, he draped one arm around my back. There was an immediate sensation of claustrophobia as the elevator doors shut. I couldn't take my eyes off Tate's arm around my waist, even though my ankle was throbbing with agony. For support, I leaned into him and held onto his shoulder. This touch, though, didn't seem forced. I felt at ease. I attempted to get out of the elevator and walk as soon as it arrived at our floor, but I could only manage 2 steps before the agony returned. I began to falter. Tate quickly noticed. Without hesitation, he took me into his arms. "Am I really being carried by you?" "Wow," I said, my expression clouded. Smirking, he grinned. "In this case, you're not really letting me decide." His voice maintained that endearingly playful cadence. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw that one. With a slight shift in his hold, he pressed me firmly against his chest. And as I laid against him, I sensed him. The warmth of his body. The strength in his hold. His breath was close to my flesh. Beyond that, I was aware. We weren't intended to be this close. I couldn't stop it. When we reached the room, he carefully laid me down on the bed. Even after he straightened my legs, my skirt's hem was a little ruffled and coiled. There was something I should have taken care of. However, I chose not to. Tate was the center of my attention. Since he couldn't take his gaze off of me. Just a second. Too long. Then Tate exhaled softly, shook his head and pulled back. "I'll get some ice." He turned toward the mini-fridge while I stayed there. Thinking about things I shouldn't be thinking about. Experiencing things I shouldn't be experiencing. When he came back holding the ice pack, his face was serious. He knelt in front of me, delicately taking my ankle in his hands. Inhaling sharply, I felt his chilly pack pressed against my skin. "I should have told you before." I lifted my gaze. "Told me what?" His eyes landed on me. Deep. Very strong. "You can't run from this, Callie." He swallowed. "We can't." Something heat spread through my veins. This was risky. But at the same time it felt too appropriate. Tate a poet. But before I could finish my sentence, his hand moved to my face. His thumb touched delicately down the corner of my lips. And in that moment there was no going back. He dragged me in. I dragged him in. At long last, passionate kiss from him. There was indisputable intensity behind it, despite its gentleness. Gradual yet electrifying. It seemed as if something were dragging me under, swallowing me whole. Then all of a sudden, putting a halt to it was completely out of my mind. My apologies. However, I chose not to. We obviously didn't have time to squander. It seemed like a long time had passed since we had anticipated this moment. None of us had even laid eyes on the garments. The ache in my leg had nearly slipped my mind. Tate got very near to me as he approached. I could make out the motions of his hands. We had made progress. There was no time we wanted to waste. As I mentioned before, Tate, you're rather attractive, and I must confess that I feel a strong attraction to you. My body couldn't contain my excitement. According to Tate, I am stunning. Something huge was happening inside of me at that same second. I can't quite place it, but I seem to have made a commotion. Why? I can tell you. In my view, Tate was wearing an unbuttoned shirt. Your physique is just remarkable. He was enormous all over, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. Because of it, I had to lend him a hand occasionally. Tate expressed his expectation that the hotel had good insulation. It made me laugh. From this point on, you will require a large number of well-insulated hotels, as I mentioned before. Plus, I was taken aback. My muscles tensed up, and I could feel the ground shaking beneath my thighs. Given his identical response, I'd say Tate approved. This is only the start. What comes next? Glancing at me, Tate, who was panting, grinned. Callie, did you just say that? My breathing was irregular, and my eyesight remained hazy. Sure, I muttered, but I did it. I knew then and there because I could see the famine in his eyes. Nothing could be done to undo this. I felt his warm breath on my skin as he leaned back ever so slightly, and my entire body responded. Tate grinned as he maintained eye contact with me. I suppose I will be in Chicago for a bit longer on my business trip. And then I was paralyzed. And then I began to giggle. It appears to be the case, I remarked, attempting to collect my thoughts. With that same mischievous grin lingering on his lips, Tate slightly cocked his head. Callie, I must say I am rather satisfied with it. Neither of us looked away from the other. We continued to smile. This was merely the first stage. And after that, everything would change. This is just the beginning. There will be more soon. You must have been deeply moved by this narrative if you have continued reading this far. Don't miss a thing since there's a lot more on the way. Make sure you're following, that you're receiving updates, and that you comment below.